Hey everyone, welcome to another AI conversation. And I'm joined again today by Sharon-Drew Morgen, who I spoke to a few months ago. Welcome back to the show, Sharon-Drew.
Hi, Dominic. Nice to see you.
Yeah, so since the time that we spoke, which was I think before Christmas, but our conversation aired on the New Year. We've been in and out of the emails and chatting offline about many things. And one of the things that I think we should really talk about, especially now that everyone's excited about AI or excited again about AI. AI comes and goes, is the risks of it. I mean, risk management is a big part of my own career, and obviously AI has its own risks. And I think you had a few things you wanted to talk about or share about how people probably aren't assessing or seeing the risks of AI completely. So, do you want to start with that and let's kick it off?
Sure. So, as you know, I'm an original thinker and inventor, and I've been inventing brain change models for decades that I've been teaching in sales and leadership and change management. And I thought that maybe I would put together a new form of AI that I am calling facilitation AI. We can talk about that later,
Hmm.
that generates questions rather than generating content.
Yeah.
So I've been talking to many AI people and consultants and tech people, and for months as I'm trying to figure out how I want to go about creating facilitation AI. And I keep hearing the same complaint over and over and over from these AI people I've been talking to. They're
Hmm.
all saying, everyone's afraid to bring it in. There's too many risks. And I say, well, what are you telling them? And they say, well, I can tell they need the visuals. I can tell. And I go, well, what do they think they need? Well, they don't know what they need.
Mm. When you say
So
they, a company, for example,
the
or
companies,
a
so
client.
their consultants aren't getting the business they should be getting because they can't find clients willing to take the risks that are involved.
Hmm.
So I'm going to start by saying the risks are unknowable.
Hmm.
The risks are unknowable and incalculable. So you have to understand before you start what the risks are, not the specific risks because you won't know them, but how to set up a company, a group, an organization that can address risks as they show up.
Hmm.
So you have to figure out how to mitigate them, how to understand the cost that is in resource, in time, in money, in change. And you need to get buy-in, because if you don't have buy-in from everyone, they will become part of the problem. Because resistance in and of itself is a risk, obviously.
Hmm.
So I have broken down all the different kinds of risks and how to consider them. And I've got them on all sheets of paper. So please forgive me if I look at all my sheets and share all the risks that I see. All right. So if there's no buy-in from everyone who's going to work with the new solution or be involved with it, if it causes problems with your current technology, if it plays havoc with the workforce, if customers don't like it, or it erodes trust, if biases invade the use, if you have legal liability or ethical pitfalls, if you can't govern, assess, measure, verify the ongoing costs, if there's no agreement on the ethics verification or regulation, it's not time to bring in AI. One thing you have to understand about risk: if the risk of changing anything is higher than the risk of maintaining the status quo, don't change. That's just a law of change. And I know everyone's excited because AI is just, I mean, it helps with forest fires. It gives people arms that they didn't have. It works with genetics. It works with the environment. It's terrific, but sometimes it's not. And we're not at a place in history yet where all the knowns are known or the unknowns are known. So first of all, you need buy-in from everyone. I know that leaders like to think that they know it all, you know, that they have all the ideas. They don't, because there's unknowable risks that may involve people that you're not aware of that it'll involve later. If they're not bought in with you and with the whole company, with the change, with the risk, with the issues that will show up afterwards, you will have the risk of resistance and they will become part of the problem, okay? You have to know what your available resources are and how willing are you to go outside for help. Because even if your tech guys want to do it, are they the right ones? Is it right to do in-house? And what will happen with your daily work? Is there a risk of daily change in your daily outreach, in your customer care, in your finances? What happens with your business functioning when you bring in AI? Yeah? Okay. Again, there is no way to get this right. I don't know how to say that enough. There is no way to get it right. So I put together some questions to ask yourself and ask each other as you're considering what your risks are. Do you have unresolved problems? I mean,
in the company, you
in the
mean?
company.
Mhm.
And do you have a wish list of things you want to resolve, or in your calendar, do you have things you're in the process of starting to resolve or considering? Is there a reason these haven't been resolved yet? Because sometimes the reason behind something not being resolved is the same problem that will show up when you try to bring AI in. Okay? Are there shared rules that hold the current problems in place, the ones that you're trying to resolve or have on your wish list? What's holding them in place? Again, they might be held in place because there's been a rule from a CEO, from the last CEO, and it's still in place. Find out what's going on behind all your unresolved issues, because those are going to rear their head at some point. Not only that, if there are rules that are maintaining something, they're going to have to be maintained even with the AI. Can the problems be resolved in-house on your wish list? If you already have budget put aside for these to be resolved, and later on you think that maybe AI can do it better, what happens to the budget? I'm going to make a bet that the budget won't be the same. I'm going to make a bet there might be a greater cost with AI. Not sure, but you got to look at it. What happens when you bring in new technology? What happens with your current technology? Is it in one little area like illustrations or videos and graphics, or will it invade all your technology? You have to understand that, and you might need a consultant to come in to help you understand that. Do you have a group, a team, a person who can monitor, govern, implement, measure, assess, and check the ethical standards of any AI you're thinking of bringing in that might do something better than something you're already planning? You have to have as complete a fact pattern as possible. And I can't say enough. Everyone that's going to touch the AI, touch a new solution, has to understand that there are risks they're going to be involved with, and they may not be on the positive end of them. Everyone has to buy in, accept risk company-wide, because you don't know where the problem is going to show up. You don't know who's going to be at the tail end of it. Is it going to erode customer trust? Okay, you have to know these things.
Uh,
People
If I
have to
can I
know.
ask a question?
Yes.
So, and sorry for interrupting. Usually when just thinking out loud, usually when you implement a technology, you're correct, there has to be buy-in. But sometimes, or in some cases, there's also a champion, maybe it's the marketing head or the IT department, whoever. So I'm thinking out loud, given all these risks that you're mentioning, is there an ideal champion for such a thing? I mean, short of the CEO of any company, because it seems like it's very universal. All of these problems seem universal, and I think it's also the nature of the AI that's quite popular now, the generative AI. I mean, there's been AI in the past, but they tend to be quite niche, applications. They look at a very specific part of the business, and they tend to be quite predictable. Whereas this generative AI is, I think, with the one causing a lot of trepidation. People are worried about it, or some people are worried about it. Some people are not. It's very, very polar extremes. Some people are all about the hype. Yeah, rah, 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 let's do this. And then you have the kind of the opposite camp who are just short of saying doing this would be a disaster. So anyway, going back to that first question, any thoughts about who should be a champion for AI, given all of these
So
risks?
it's a, thank you for asking that. If you've decided on making a change in marketing, for example, so probably the marketing head would be the champion, but maybe a customer might be the champion. I think you have to get as flexible and creative as possible. Because remember, there is always technology involved. So where does the head of technology fit in? Or is there a consultant that you have to bring in? And who does the consultant report to? Does the consultant report to the head of marketing, or does the consultant report to the head of technology? Okay, I think that each company has to decide, but there's one universal that I can't say enough. The whole marketing department, for example, would have to buy into doing something differently, because they're the ones on the front end. They're the ones that would have to deal with the problems with the customers who find an ethical abuse. Okay, or what if there's a team that just does governance and assessment and measurement? Maybe they're the ones that are driving it, because if you don't have ethical standards, if it's going to not work with governance, if it's not going to be legal, you don't want to bring AI in. Okay, so what if there was a team that had someone that measured, assessed, handled government and ethics, someone that handled customer outreach, someone that was involved with technology? What if there was a team that was the lead team? Does that work? Yeah, does that?
Like a transformation team, that's something
Yes.
like that. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think there's just one problem involved.
Yeah.
If, if the people on the marketing team, again, we're just using this as an example. If the people on the marketing team have to change their daily routines, if they have a different reporting structure, if they have different communication with clients, if their old forms of content management no longer fit with the new AI, they have a different problem. All right, the people involved who touch and work with the new AI every day must be bought in, and their voices must be heard. Because where you don't bring somebody in, not only are you losing an idea that you might need or information that would be vital, you're missing someone who will be part of the solution. And
Mhm.
if they're not part of the solution, they're part of the problem, because then resistance becomes as big of a risk as anything else.
Yeah, you know what you mentioned opened up many things. So, let's tackle it one at a time. The first thing, probably the
I have
most,
one more list I want to share.
yeah, one
You
of the
want to go?
things that, one of the things the most obvious is what you're mentioning about resistance. Obviously, when people talk about AI, inevitably it's gonna come to, will someone lose a job? Because AI tends to replace people. So that's one part. The other part, after we've dealt with the jobs, is you mentioned ethics. It's interesting how the word ethics has started to become popular again when AI became popular. So can you, let's do the jobs first. What are your thoughts about how do you deal with the prospect of people, not necessarily intentionally, but at some point AI tends to displace people from their work.
I have a question for you. When people's jobs change, which invariably they undoubtedly will with AI, is there a way for these people to learn something in the AI implementation that can give them a new job they might like? Is there a way for them to go to a different department with
Hmm.
the skills they have and not be involved in the AI? I think that's one of the risks that has to be addressed. And right now, I don't think people are being fired. Are they being fired?
Well, it depends. I've heard some news about call centers, for example. I haven't seen it happen like in large numbers. I mean, maybe occasionally. I've also heard that in the software development, sector, um, it's not like people are losing jobs, although there have been a number of layoffs in the States, for example. But in terms of job growth, it's been slower. So that means some automation is probably happening at some level. But
I'm going to
yeah,
assume that there are certain industries that are going to be hit more than other industries.
yeah.
It was like funny. I'm a big tennis fan. I was watching tennis yesterday, and the ball boys and ball girls running after the balls. I'm saying,
Hmm.
oh, their job will never be replaced by AI. Right?
But
There's only
those cameras are AI driven already, and they're the ones
they're
making.
already drones, but I understand.
Yeah,
So I think that there will be whole industries that are at risk
yeah.
for sure. And so what happens to the people? Do they learn AI to become part of the solution? Do they have to learn go into a new field?
Hmm.
I think it's an overarching problem. And I think that as the companies figure out their risks, that's one of the factors that has to be factored in.
Yeah, my favorite example, two of them, whenever this comes up is, so for example, like I was trained as an accountant. I never became one, but that was my training. So I said when I was studying accounting, that was also when Microsoft Excel started to become popular. And there were people saying, "Oh, accounting's gonna die because spreadsheets are gonna take over." But what happened was, no, accounting didn't die. Accounting used started to adopt Excel because before we had these adding machines and these columnar pads and saying, okay, it's Excel didn't kill accounting. It's accountants with Excel are the ones who displaced accountants who didn't. And then on the other hand, you have something like encyclopedias. Encyclopedia salesmen were quite the rage once upon a time, before the internet. And then when Wikipedia came out, if you remember, people didn't trust Wikipedia. Like, what am I?
They
Are you
didn't
gonna?
trust the internet when the internet came out.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, you mean the Britannicas are gonna go away? We used to spend quite a sum of money buying these books, and Wikipedia is a free encyclopedia. Is that gonna replace Britannica? I remember an encyclopedia salesman actually saying that. And it didn't take 10 years. After 10 years, I mean, the encyclopedia shrank into CD-ROMs and then eventually it was on the internet. So that's the question: which jobs are the accountants who just embrace technology, and which jobs are like the encyclopedia salesman where technology just erased them? I
And
don't know the answer.
I think, no, I don't think there's an answer yet.
Yeah,
And just like when in the early days of the World Wide Web, I
yeah.
started up a tech company in London in 1983.
Wow.
Okay, that was before, and we were handling the first new fourth generation language. And every time I would go to a potential customer, they wanted to know the risks.
Yeah,
So I spent as much time discussing risks with them and managing the risk as we did discussing the potential solutions.
yeah,
So I think everything is going to morph over time.
yeah,
And right now we have so many downsides and examples of problems and ethical standards and so forth that right now everyone's scared. I think it's going to end up okay because I think the rewards outweigh the risks. I think. There's a group in California, probably the whole state, that has set up AI to monitor for fires. They have a very big fire
mm,
problem in
yeah.
California.
Forest
So
fires.
that forest fires. So now the AI is helping find the fires before they really start. So there's things that are really important that are happening. We just have to figure out how to manage the risks. And jobs may be one of them. I do think there's going to be some kind of a morphing and some kind of learning and some kind of profession change.
Yeah.
But again, that has to be brought in when the company is discussing the risks.
Yeah, and then it's an excellent segue to the second question about the ethics. It's funny about whenever I'm in an ethical conversation on AI ethics, um, there's so many aspects to it. I think one of the biggest problems worth highlighting is in the era of the old AI, you at least had control over data that went into the model. Because you want to get a cat detector, you should get cat pictures, right? And it's up to you how many cats you want to train the AI on. But with these generative AI, you never had a hand in how many books ChatGPT and Gemini and all these other things were trained on. And then now people are starting to realize that there's lots of biases in them. Like there was this big deal about Gemini a few weeks back where it just started eliminating white faces from any photo. Like you say, "Hey, give me a picture of a Nazi soldier." And black Nazi soldiers popped up or female Nazi soldiers popped up, which is completely, irrelevant to World War II. So you have to imagine there must have been a special rule that was put in that model somehow that wanted to enforce some sort of a diversity or something, and it's continuing to bother Gemini right now. They took it offline and trying to fix it. So I think that's a big problem now. So the first problem was the bias, and now you go full. People are saying woke, full woke. You're enforcing another bias, which is human
But
rules, right? So I don't know where the middle ground is.
we'll discuss that. I'm going to talk about my facilitation AI because I think that addresses that a little.
Yeah.
But I had a problem with that as well. Someone sent me a link. They asked ChatGPT, what is buying facilitation? Well, buying facilitation is a new sales paradigm that facilitates the buy side
Mm,
before sales takes over on the sales side.
yeah.
And I've been very careful for the 40 years that I've been training this and writing books on it, and since I've invented it, about saying this, the buy side. It's not the sell side, it's the buy side. And we're not talking about product, we're helping them traverse the 13 steps of decision making and change that occur on the buy side before they even become prospects.
Yeah.
So it's pre-sales. I've been saying this for 40 years. I've probably written, I don't know, 400 articles, wrote 7 books on this topic.
Yeah.
Someone sent me a link. They said, what is buying facilitation? I read this in horror because it had buying facilitation with a registered trademark. Thank you very much. Invented by Sharon-Drew Morgen. Thank you very much. And then it went on to liken it to the sales process,
Mm,
how it can be used to pitch better and push better and get in faster.
which is completely
What?
different from what it was,
It's
right?
the absolute opposite. Not
Yeah.
only that, I'm the only one that writes on this.
Yeah.
So they need to take my bits of content and ideas and get rid of them and take the traditional ideas about sales and replace them. So it wasn't even a direct comparison. So it wasn't even being trained properly.
Mm-hmm.
So the question becomes, how are we training our LLMs and our AI implements? How are we doing this? The apps, are they wrong? Are they gathering the wrong data? What is this?
Yeah. That's
For
a big
people like
problem.
me,
Yeah.
I'm an inventor with unique models and they're getting it wrong. So people like me are very upset about it. Just saying.
Yeah, that's
I
another, I mean, that maybe that's another dimension about how these models are being used as sources of truth. And I remember in our last chat, we were, I was saying that's probably the worst way to use these models. Or except when they're maybe connected to the internet and they can search the internet for the actual facts. Like if for example if ChatGPT could Google you, then it would be less prone to error. Unfortunately, these models seem to be they're replacing Google in the worst possible way, which is bad. They're best used being connected to an existing source of knowledge and then letting them interpret the knowledge instead. So I mean that I don't know how people are gonna correct for that. I think people are gonna, and in a way, it's OpenAI's fault. They said this is a Google killer, and I said, "You, why did you say that?" I mean, now everyone's gonna start treating chatbots like Google. So there's a place for a search engine, and there's another place for a chatbot. But a chatbot is not a search engine, at least not in a traditional sense.
No. So one thing I want to do, and then we'll get back to the conversation, because I have a whole list of minimizing the risks for companies. Let me just
Mhm.
finish this piece and then we
Sure.
can do it if you want. Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. If the company has decided that AI is a good alternative, that the risks seem to be worth it and they can manage them. One, generate the rules and norms of use that match the company identity. Because if you don't generate the rules of use, you're going to have this sort of bias and
Mhm.
ethical problem creeping in. Know the tolerance that you have in terms of time risk, resource risk, reputation risk, customer trust risk. I put risk, I put together a set of parameters for the risk factors. I'm going to read these. Determine the criteria for customer ease and use, implementation, who's going to do it, internal, external, ethics, privacy, cybersecurity, verification,
Mhm.
national corporate regulations and governance, resource expenditure, and cost of possible upheaval.
Mhm.
Okay, if you don't know the cost of upheaval, oh, are you going to be surprised? Changes to corporate messaging. Okay, agree to your goals and how will they be maintained over time?
Yeah.
It's not a one-shot deal. This is an ongoing issue. Manage the buy-in, make sure the employees are always on board. Where there's resistance, deal with it immediately because it'll creep in.
Mhm.
Account for the needs and fears of the employees. Iterate the risks into the project lifecycle. Okay. Know the risks of failure. What will failure look like? What will happen if there's failure? How will you know if there's failure? How far do you let it go before it might turn around? When do you stop it? You have to have some rules for this. And does your implementation match your corporate strategy? Without understanding this, the cost of adoption may be too high. All right. So those are just some ideas I put forth as people venture into this unknown mystery, which I think is going to end up being wonderful. But I think at the moment it's just a little bit unknown and scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of disruption, not just jobs is one, but even the way products and services are structured can be, completely disrupted. Like, I don't know if you saw this article a few months back, or well, a few weeks back, no, months back. Someone was able to couldn't fool a chatbot into selling him a Chevy Tahoe, those big SUVs, for $1. And the chatbot said, "Yes, this is a legally binding transaction, blah blah blah." So it was an attempt by a customer to just show that these chatbots are not reliable, or at least the way they were being deployed. You don't put a frontline chatbot without guardrails. And now I think it's part of I think there was a legal dispute right now because technically the customer did, complete a sale. I mean, yeah, sure, the chatbot malfunctioned, but I want my Chevy Tahoe for $1. And how things
You
are.
know what? He'll probably win the case because it's probably legal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then there was this other one about months back. I don't know if you remember, there was a website called Zillow, and it
Yes.
does real estate, right? And apparently it had an AI that used historical data to make recommendations. Anyway, long story short, the AI malfunctioned, and Zillow ended up losing, I don't know, a couple of $1 billion because it just assumed that the AI would remain static and not evolve over time, and housing prices are not static; they kind of move around, right? So I mean
That's,
that's another problem.
I think companies need this team that includes the governance
Yeah,
and the oversight. It's not just the marketing department's issue.
yeah.
It becomes the company's issue.
Hmm.
And unless the company is set up to manage these risks and to govern them, I don't think it's time for them to enter into an AI implementation.
But what about the other side of it? Because obviously, I mean, the right thing to do is not to jump into AI, but unfortunately, maybe the hype or the pressure is so high, many of them are going to jump in anyway. So, how do you deal with that? I mean, it takes a lot of maybe resolve to just ignore the hype, right? And just stick to your core offering with or without artificial intelligence. What explains that pressure, and then how do you deal with that pressure? Because obviously
No,
that's
I have an
important.
article out on this week called Groupthink.
Groupthink. Okay.
Um, by the way, I have a website called Sharon-Drew.com, sharondrew.com with a hyphen in it. And I write articles on this sort of thing. All of my work is based on facilitating change and ethics and spirituality in the workplace is a term that I was using when I was running conferences in the 90s, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it I don't even know how to mitigate that problem, Dominic. It's
It's human nature, isn't it? It's like, how do you mitigate hunger?
but
People are gonna.
it's systemic.
Yeah,
We work for Google because we can wear jeans. We
yeah,
don't work at IBM because we have to wear a suit. I mean, that's obviously silly, but
yeah. I getcha.
we all follow the same norms. And when you walk into a culture, whether it's a family culture or a company culture or a store culture, the rules and identity of that culture are apparent.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone follows them, or you can't work there. I mean, imagine going to a board meeting and somebody walks in with a bathing suit. I mean, there's no rules that say you can't, but you can't.
Yeah.
And
Or.
I was the second woman in a public company in England.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My company, I was part of a much larger company and I started up a tech group that became its own company. And
In
I,
London. Okay.
in London in the
Yeah.
80s. And I would do things that made all the men furious. There was one point where someone said something, I got so mad, there was like a tear that came out of my eye. And the board manager said, let's let Sharon-Drew have a few minutes to take care of her emotion. And
What?
I went,
I guess this is like the UK in the 80s, right? So,
This is the UK in the 80s. And
yeah.
I went, I'm not sad. I'm livid. And you know what? The next board meeting, one of the men
Mhm.
actually cried
You made the
because
guys cry?
no, he made himself cry. But the thing is that as a woman, I brought a new rule. I
Hmm.
brought a new norm. I made it possible.
Hmm.
Okay. So how do the norms change? I mean, that's really, really the question.
Yeah.
How do you change the norms of an organization when they're concrete, they're habituated, they're normalized?
Yeah.
Because people like me, as an original thinker, I mean, I've been trying to get my facilitation AI thinking into the field of AI, and people are ignoring me. Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm an old woman? Is it because it's not like generative AI? Is it the sales model that I brought in that's on the buy side that facilitates buying?
Hmm.
I'm still getting pushback on that after 40 years and a New York Times business bestseller.
Yeah.
Changing the system is close to impossible, depending on what it is. Now, the phone was easy to change because everyone believed that there was a need for that. When I ask salespeople now, and sales has a 95% fail rate. So one would think they'd be,
95?
yes,
95%?
they
Wow.
close 5%,
It's practically
and the
100%. Yeah.
5% is built in. It's built in. So they hire 9 times more salespeople.
Hmm.
Okay. So they cost, and what they do is they play chicky Mickey. They have the costs, and then they have the profits. They separate out the different ways of financing it.
Hmm.
So they put the content marketing on the cost side. So it looks like you're closing 17%, and they don't subtract it because it's on a different ledger.
Hmm.
So they play different numbers so that they don't have to look at the fact that they're failing 95% of the time. But they
Hmm.
have factored it in. And
Okay.
when I discuss this with people, they say, oh, we know it's failing. We know it's a failed model, but everyone's using it. So their risks are less.
Yeah.
Okay, they manage their risk because there's buy-in. That's what I'm suggesting that you do when you're bringing in AI. You manage the risk, so there's buy-in. But there's a lot of groupthink around. Think about this. Sales has a 95% failure rate. Training has a 90% failure rate. Change management has a 97% failure rate. Habit change has a 97% failure rate. And yet all of these models maintain over time because their risk is accepted.
Because people don't want to change. That's basically the message,
You
right?
know something, this is my topic that I've been studying for 60 years.
Yeah.
It's not that people don't want to change. Because they don't understand what's at the other side, because they don't have different neural circuits to interpret new things differently, the risk of change is higher than the risk of staying the same.
Mm.
Okay, and they don't know how to mitigate that. It's not the change they're afraid of, it's the systems disruption. So are the rules different? Are the behaviors different? Are the outputs different? When those are unknown, just like they are now in AI, when the rules and the change and the output is unknown, they don't know how to make the change. They don't have the right skills, they don't have the right tools, they don't have the right knowledge. When people have to change behaviors, when people become prospects, they
Hmm.
have to figure out the change. And believe it or not, I have figured out there are 13 steps that all change takes. You ready?
Hmm.
Okay. Number
15.
one,
1 5.
there's 13, but
13.
there's 3 main categories.
Okay.
One, you have to understand the current state. Where are you? Where
Mm.
are you now? One of the problems with change management, for example, is that leaders think they know what has to be fixed. And when I say to them, well, have you talked to any of the frontline workers? They say,
Surprisingly.
no,
Yeah.
oh, no, I know what the problem is. I go, oh, so you know what the customers are saying to the frontline workers and what the frontline workers are dealing with every day. Oh, well, no, we know approximately what it is. We do it from our end. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Until you talk to everybody, you can't get the full fact pattern. And until you have the full fact pattern, you can't know if anything is missing. Just because the leaders think something is missing, it may not be missing on the front end. You don't know. So where are you and what's missing? One
Yeah.
of the things systems then do when they find something is missing is they try to fix it themselves,
Mhm.
because the risk of change is less when you use the same rules, when you have the same norms, when you have the same agreements.
Yeah.
So people always try to fix them. So if your car doesn't work when you go out in the morning, the first thing you do isn't go to a dealership and buy a new car. No, you get it towed and you have your mechanic look at it. And it's only if they can't fix it that they suggest you might get a new car. And then you've got another problem, because do you want to sell that one or do you have to leave it there? What do you do with it if it's not working? Do you fix it well enough to get it home? Do you have room for it? Then you have to buy another car. Is your wife wanting more children? Do you want to get a bigger car? Do you want to have a van? So the third thing that happens after you realize you cannot fix it yourself is you have to understand all the elements that have to be addressed. You
Yeah.
understand the risk of change, and you have to get buy-in. Until there's buy-in, you can't change. Okay, so it's not the change that's the problem. It's that people haven't gone through all these factors to understand what it means.
They're not warm enough for the change to occur. Like
They don't understand
cold audience, something like that, right?
if you think you can fix something yourself and someone's trying to pitch something to you, you're not going to listen because you can fix it yourself. It's like you wake up and the car's not working. You get a call from someone saying, oh, I have a new car to sell you. Well, maybe you need that car, but you've got too much other work to do to figure out if you can fix your old car first.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the change that's the problem. It's just that people don't know how to manage the risks of it.
Yeah. Okay. Just thinking out loud. So you mentioned facilitation AI. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and see how we can
Yes,
tie it all
so
together?
I spent 10 years, only a crazy inventor. I spent 10 years inventing a new form of question,
Mhm.
because all questions are biased by the asker,
Yeah.
right? That's what a question is. The asker wants information. But what if someone has to find out something or discover something or think about something or change something? It's not an information issue. It's a personal issue. So I wanted to find out how someone could ask themselves a question that didn't have bias, or that a salesperson or a leader or a trainer or a coach could ask a client a question to help them discover their own answer, because ultimately the answer lies within the system,
Yeah.
right? For a personal response. So I spent 10 years figuring out where that the responder has to be thinking, has to be looking to avoid their own internal bias so they could find their own answer. And eventually I came up with a facilitative question that uses different words in a different order and different sequences so that people can find that place in their brain, and it's very unconscious often, where their own answer is stored. When I began reading about AI, I said, wait, where can you ask it a personal question? So what if I had an aged mom who had Alzheimer's, and maybe she should be in a memory center or in an old age home or something? Is
Yeah.
it time now? I don't know if it's time now. Generative AI is not going to tell me when to put my mom in a memory center.
Mhm.
What if I keep going on the same diet or different diets and I put all the weight back on? how can I maintain the weight loss when I haven't done that before? That's not something that generative AI can answer for you because it's a personal answer. So I would like to create facilitation AI that prompts my facilitative questions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if I say, what's stopping me from maintaining my weight loss when I lose weight? The first response you might get from facilitation AI might be, has there ever been a time you maintained habit change before now?
Okay.
So that's not a question generative AI would come up with, right?
These
So
are do these questions follow some form of framework that we can train into the AI, or
yeah,
how would you achieve it?
that's the magic sauce, Dominic.
Yeah.
Okay, in my new book, How, I have 100 pages on how to formulate facilitative questions. When people buy the book, I send them an apology saying, I wish I could make this easier for you, but it's just.
Okay.
Um, the problem isn't the rules, because I know the rules. I mean, I can give you the rules.
Mhm.
After 10 years, I figured them out. That's not the problem. The problem is that sometimes AI doesn't understand the intent of the question. When they go to the LLMs, they don't search in the right places because they're searching for information. They're not searching for belief systems.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm even wondering if we would have to change the kinds of LLMs. I mean, that's where I have a problem. If anyone listening to this can deal with that issue for me, we can create facilitation AI real quick because a demo would be real easy.
Yeah.
But search has the same problem. Search doesn't always come up with the right answer because they don't always understand, the AI doesn't understand the intent of the question. So that's one of the problems that I'm dealing with. How can do you have any answers to that? How do you get AI to understand the intent?
Yeah, I mean, well, it'll probably take another hour to drill down, but just off the top of my head, I think one of the biggest, I don't know, illusions about these language models. And by the way, I'm a big fan of them. But then now, maybe more than a year in, you kind of see where their fatal flaw is, and it's the design. They're trained to respond on the basis of text relationships. So a lot depends on the prompt, for example, and that's, I think, where your facilitation, framework comes in, because you can prompt a model to prompt you back, but so much depends on whatever data or text that the model was trained on. So if it doesn't have enough of a
Right.
context, quote unquote, which is just text relationships to the model,
So
then it won't be able to prompt you back properly.
when you put in a facilitative question, for example, into a generative AI, it sends you back different hospices in your neighborhood,
Yeah,
for example, or different kinds of diets.
yeah,
It doesn't understand the intent of the question. And I think that's as big a problem with, at least with facilitation AI, as it is for people who are using generative AI, because it
yeah.
doesn't understand unless it's a very generalized
Or
answer.
I'd even go as far as say these models really don't understand anything in the way humans
Right.
understand something. It just looks like it they do because of the way text relationships work. And I think that's, if we segue back to ethics, that's a big deal, because the way some people are writing these rules on ethics, they kind of make an implicit assumption that these models actually do some form of thinking, and they're trying to govern it like the way you would govern humans. It doesn't work that way, or at least I don't think it works that way. So it
Do you
ultimately
have
will
any,
fail.
do you have any thoughts on how AI can be trained to understand intent?
It's like a same question about, can AI be conscious? And I think the closest we'll ever get to something like that is if there's a knowledge base that mimics what intent looks like. Because AI can then reference that knowledge base. But again, so much depends on the way questions are formulated, the way prompts are made. Like for example, one popular application I like is Chat PDF. It's a variant of Chat GPT where you upload a PDF and you can talk to the PDF. You can talk to a document, and that's cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and so I uploaded a poem. My favorite example is Desiderata, an old poem. And I would ask, okay, Desiderata, how should I deal with loud people? And there is actually a phrase in that poem that says, avoid loud people because they can be harmful to your spirit. Because it's in the poem, it knows how to answer my question. So again, in a way, that's kind of a proxy for reasoning. If it's in the knowledge base, it's there. But again, how big of a knowledge base do you need to be able to approximate intent? I don't know.
Or I have a question.
Yeah,
Or do you create different knowledge bases
depending on the situation. Yeah,
depending on the situation
so it becomes
and
modular. Yeah,
that's right, and that's a good idea.
yeah,
And create different LLMs.
for
So
situations. Yeah.
yeah, so when you get on, you can quick, pick the one you want.
Yeah, I think those are great life hacks. In fact, there's another one where you have more than one model. And they kind of argue with each other and then they come up with an answer. These are interesting ways around the problem. And I think it'll work as long as everyone knows that this is what's happening. So you don't expect too much from such a system knowing how it's working. I think the problem with that approach is if you take it to the opposite extreme and people are kind of either, sorry to say, too dumb or ignorant, or they're making an assumption about um you know uh how models work, and then they don't realize that, hey, look, it's actually an illusion because these are just three LLMs arguing with each other. And then you bring it to a domain that's life or death, like law or medicine. That's what I'm worried about. So in other words, inappropriate use of the tool. And then going back to your first point, companies seem to be in a mad rush to implement them. And then you have these $1 Tahoes coming up. That's the problem. Where where it's great if everyone knew, hey, look, these things aren't that smart. I mean, they're good for many things, but don't ask it for advice or certain types of advice.
Well, but if
Great.
you have facilitation AI, you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
See,
I
I
mean,
think
that's what I think in a very long-winded way. It's more about being real about what to expect, but that's maybe sometimes too much to ask
I
for
think
everyone.
if you can add facilitation AI, you can add it to medical, so that people who are trying to change habits and trying to eat differently, for example,
Yeah.
and you can add it to different industries as a front end and then have generative AI take over. So if I figure out that when I'm ready to have my mother be put into a home, for example,
Yeah.
then it would lead me to 8 homes near my house or something, near her house, whatever. So I think they could be used together. I don't think we're anywhere close to being done with what AI is.
No, we're not. And okay, I think this is worth bringing up
Okay,
because I think one reason why people are trying to jam fit this thing, which is a great technology, but it's kind of square pegs and round holes at some point. People are trying to just use it too much.
but if they follow what I suggest, they won't do that.
Yeah. I think one reason is because before these models became popular, you had the completely opposite phenomena of, IT generally being very hard to do. Programming is too rigid. There's not enough developers to do your solution, and usually the IT department goes off and does their own thing, and by the time they come back, it's a complete monstrosity that you wouldn't even use it. So the moment sort of a viable alternative comes and, hey, I don't even need to talk to the IT people. I just talk to AI. So people are now flocking in that direction. So I feel that we're not solving the actual problem, which is technology isn't solving problems anymore. And the attempt of AI to kind of be the proxy for all of that creates its own problems rather than just hit the problem on the head and say, why is technology too hard? Or why is programming so difficult? Why can't we come up with a better mousetrap and fix this thing? I mean,
Also
what do you
part
think?
of groupthink in there. I had a tech company that I started up in 1983,
Yeah,
and my tech guys would say, boy, they're all stupid. The clients are all stupid, and they're always stupid. And
yeah,
I said to myself, let's see how stupid. So I called the head tech guy in, and I said, this was in 1983. This is before ACT, and there's before databases didn't really exist yet. They were just beginning. And I said to him, I would like a way that I can keep all of my prospects and all and in one. And he says, I know what you need. And I went to myself, oh yeah. I went, oh good. 2 weeks later, he said, I got something to show you. And he shows me this mess. And I said, what is this? And he said, well, this is what you need. I said, no, it's not. You never let me finish. He said, well, I knew what you needed. I said, and this is why buyers or clients are stupid. I said, what if you'd said to me, what are the 4 outputs it would have if you could have all your wishes? What would a screen look like if you could design it any way you wanted? And he went, I never discussed any of this with you.
yeah.
I said, no, you made assumptions. So one of the things that we do is we have technology separate. It's not integrated. Maybe we need to integrate technology with everything else, so it's not such a mystery, and so that decisions can be made with everybody rather than have them be separated. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's one approach. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's being pragmatic more than just. I mean, there's this. I don't know how many axes this thing is. On the one hand, some people are too theoretical, so the opposite is people are very applied. But then there's also the other axis where people would rather focus on the PR and the illusion of something happening versus actually doing something, because sometimes doing something is just boring or it doesn't give you too many PR points. um and there could be many other things. I mean, the other part as well is, are people even trained properly to
No,
implement these things? I'm not talking like technical training. You can get that from YouTube. I'm talking about practical training. Have they experienced these things right and left? And yeah, you're correct. For the most part, they haven't, or they're not. I mean, the word expert gets thrown around a lot, right? So yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it. We gotta bring it back to basics. We gotta learn how to ask the right questions, and God forbid it becomes political in a company. We're not even talking about politics
uh,
outside.
there's
Politics
a
inside.
whole nother, there's an entirely whole other issue that would be 5 podcasts. If you study how the brain works, people are incapable, people's brains are incapable of translating what someone else says, so that when we think we hear something, we're only hearing a fraction of what was intended. And it's our brain's fault. It's got nothing to do with our intention. When sound vibrations enter the ear, they get mangled along the way until they reach their destination circuit, which may be translating it badly. So we hear X, but the person said A. And
Yeah.
then we say, no, you said X. The person says, no, I really said A. And then there's a fight. I lost a partnership when I was with this couple, and the man said, I'm surprised you said X. And I said, well, I didn't. I said A. And he said, no, you didn't. I was right there. I know exactly what you said. I said, well, no, I really did say A. And his wife said, no, she really did say A. She didn't say X, John. And John said, you're both liars. You're lying to me. And he never talked to me again. And that was the end of our relationship.
No way. Wow.
That's what our brain does. And we haven't even factored that in. And that's not anybody's fault. That's just our brain's fault. It's just
Yeah, you know
adding.
what that reminds me of? It's a tangential thing, but I think it's worth mentioning. I remember reading a book about how to pitch, you know, pitch anything. And anyway, I forgot the guy who wrote it, but anyway, he made a point about everyone's trying to adopt some sort of a frame in any conversation. The most popular one is status. I'm older than you, I know more than you, I outrank you. So a lot of people get taken by status. Then you have the analyst frame. Let's get into the details, break it down. Here are the facts, here are the figures, here are the numbers. And then you have the time frame. Time is, hey, this is taking too long. How can we get it done in as quick as possible? And then the last is the price frame. You know, and I think that's close to what you're talking about. Find out what their desires are, talk to those desires. Anyway, one life hack that I remember from that book, it's a very thick book, but I only picked up maybe one chapter or two, is that you never meet a frame with the exact with the exact same frame. So if someone's coming at you with status, the temptation is to come back with even more status. Like, hey, I've got a PhD. Yeah, but I've been working here 20 years. It's status versus status. You don't get anything done. The best way is to do another frame. So if someone's coming at you with rank, you go with details. Okay, fine, you're the boss, but here's what we need to do. Step one, step two, step three. And then you flip it around. If someone is coming at you with too many details, you go with the time frame. You know what? I'd love to talk about all the details, but we got to get
There,
this done.
there's
And
a way, that's still, in my mind, there's still some form of competition.
yeah,
But I would say something like, so how could that support the two of us working together?
right. Collaboration, right? Something mutually
Just get
beneficial.
out instead of me,
Yeah,
just make it be a we. So, oh, I'm so glad you have that status. That's terrific. How could we use that to our advantage?
yeah, exactly. No, no, that's
Because
perfect. That's really
we're
perfect.
not we're
Yeah,
not really in competition with each other. We always have to do, I call it a we space. We
yeah.
have to do it together. So if you want to be smarter than me, okay, how could we use that to make something better?
And the funny part, there's so many funny things, is there's a lot of competition that it just exists in people's heads. And they think other people are trying to outgun them, outdo them. Half of that's actually just in their minds. And they get caught up in this pissing contest, ego contest. When you drop shield, using Star Trek, drop your shields and try to understand what the other person is trying to do just for a minute, it changes everything. And then you realize, hey, this person's not really after me after all. They're actually just trying to do the best they can. And it's just me thinking in terms of, conspiracies and such. I don't know. That's how I feel sometimes. People are so paranoid about status and rank and competition.
Not all, I don't, we can get into a whole nother conversation here. I don't think women are as much as men. I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, the gender thing. Yeah, that's another thing. Anyway, just being conscious that we're finally on the hour again, and we barely scratched the surface. So there's definitely going to be an episode 3. So maybe let's try to summarize. Can you talk a little bit, maybe summarize a bit of what do you think we should be watching out in terms of the risks? And then after that, we barely discussed facilitation AI. Give us some parting thoughts about facilitation AI so that people know
Okay,
what to look out
the,
for.
the risks of bringing in AI are incalculable and unknowable and many.
Yeah.
There's no way to know what they are before you start. The best thing you can do is bring everyone together, gather all the data you can, make sure everyone is bought in, because when the problems occur, they have to bring their weight to solving it with, and it's everybody, and if managers have to meet with groups and bring their voice to leadership, they must do that. But it can't be top down, right?
Yeah.
And you have to know who's going to do what and what's going to affect what. What are the time, resource, personnel costs?
The
And if you,
impact. Yeah.
the, well, and the risk is there going to be downtime, what's going to happen to the budget, what's going to happen. So the other thing is there must be a team. I think it should be a management team that manages the governance, the measurement, the assessment, the liability. All right, you've got all those risks as well. So as best you can, have people in place that understand these problems, manage these problems, and put together a list for yourself as to how to maintain the rules and norms of your company, how to make sure that the right people are involved, that there's a place for people that whose jobs will be at risk. Okay, I know this is odd when talking about AI, but when bringing it in, it's really a collaboration problem with the risk. Because together you can figure it out, and it's not whether you're gonna have risk, it's how you manage them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that. In terms of facilitation AI, I would like to create an entirely new form of facilitation AI that generates facilitative question prompts. It doesn't generate new knowledge or new
There's an
information.
answer you asks you instead, right? Yeah.
What it does, it brings the asker down their 13 steps of decision making.
Yeah.
So they can figure out, because there's personal questions that someone from the outside cannot answer. Okay, someone cannot tell you how to manage your post-diet follow-up activity differently. You have to figure out how to do that yourself based on your own needs and your own history. So I want to have a facilitation AI that prompts questions that helps the user discover their own answers first for personal questions, not for all of them,
Yeah.
but to change habits and to make big life decisions. And then you can have generative AI at the tail end of that. So
To
that
assimilate, process the information afterwards, right?
that's right. That's right. You like that idea? I think that's a great idea. Does anybody want to help me with it?
Let's do it. I mean, hopefully by the next episode we have something to show. Yeah, but
Yeah, let's you and I make a demo,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
This
Oh,
was fun, Dominic.
yeah, likewise. I want to thank Sharon-Drew for sharing more
And go
insights.
to my site, go to
Yeah, we'll
sharon-drew.com.
have that in the description finally, sharon-drew.com.
Right, and I've
Uh,
got my 8 inventions on a new way to train, a new way to listen, a new way to ask questions, a new way to sell, a new way to go through change management, and my new book, How.
why don't I flash that now just to get everyone to see it? And I was just browsing through it earlier. You even have our first episode there, which is great, you know.
I do, I put up
Yeah.
our first episode right on the
Yeah,
front.
right there in the middle, right there, smack in the middle. So this is Sharon Drew's website. So please visit it. And yeah, and looking forward to having you again on the show, Sharon Drew, to discuss more about facilitation AI and other things.
Thank you, Dominic.